how do you get these teenagers with their brains all over the place to retrain them to fire the specific muscles that you need to prevent injuries? Because it seems, as we've talked, I'm sure, like how we've all experienced,
Yes.
like when you're all over the place emotionally, your brain's doing all sorts of things. You weren't taught proper mechanics for whatever the reason was. How do you take these athletes then and you get that specific nerve or that blocker to fire that muscle that you need to decelerate or to land or like whatever you're trying to trigger in them? How are you able to go into that athlete and make that happen successfully? Because it seems like that would be pretty difficult given the wide range of different things. That
Absolutely, you're right, yes. And I'm going to go back to the question you asked from before about the structure of the program.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is very specific because we glide through different hormones while we're learning things. But besides that, our nervous system goes through a sympathetic nervous stage, which is past stress regulations, into a parasympathetic nervous stage, which is basically new information coming in, rewiring your brain for new, becoming like a blank piece of paper.
Right.
And when we go into left side of your brain, long-term memory, right side of your brain going to short-term memory.
Right.
So most of the time you want to shift your athletes in a parasympathetic stage.
Okay.
Be able to understand that the athlete is basically going to be eyes on you understanding and how you will be able to apply these components and retrain the brain to do the proper things.
Okay.
When you are gliding on a stress hormone, the cortisol is up. So for instance, right, factor COVID-19 right now, a lot of kids are like, I'm not going to play anymore. My season is canceled. My parents are at home all day. I need some free time. From the kids that walk into the facility or I'm working with a kid, their best friend has been stressed.
Yeah.
So how do I get this kid to be from the stress factor into a complete endorphin release that way they can able to understand and open up the right side of the brain? This is a psychological game. Be able to change them from their past. Right. I'm like, right now, I need you here right now. Okay, let's do this. And it can be into a mathematical game. Musical can be anything to shift them into a parasympathetic stage. From the moment they go into a parasympathetic stage, open the right side of their brain, now I have them working with me. They're present.
Right. So that's interesting. So it goes into this whole sports psychology side of things. You're using it in combination with the physical prehabbing, like you called it earlier, to make sure they don't get injured. But there's a whole other side that's just the mental side. Do you do a lot in that as well, or do you think you like to keep those two things in combination with each other because they work together?
I think it's a great combination. It's not like water and oil. This is like gasoline and fire.
Right.
It will always lead, right? So if you have an athlete who just came from an injury, before I even put this guy to do the biomechanic, I need to really know where his mental stage is.
Right.
Do you really want to continue to do this? Why do you want to train? I mean, I really need to understand where they stand.
Right, because if they're not all in, they could get injured again.
Correct. They're going to be doubting themselves. They're going to say, if not, they're going to power through like we say.
Right.
But that power through is just stress into a firefly trying to get through things done, right?
Right.
But that's not really teaching rational planning. It's into an emotional thinking.
Right.
That emotional thinking, I can get you to get fire up right now, but that's me putting the emotion into you, firing a different epigenetic system.
Right.
But that's going to die 2 weeks from now.
Right.
But from the moment you sit down and you structure your own program and you know where you're going, then you put some thought into it.
Yeah, because you have to buy in to structure your own program, and you want to get back, and you want to get back to the field, and you want to get back in shape, rather than you think, oh, my parents want me to do this, or like whatever outside pressure there is, because that could only lead to. I've seen that before with teammates and stuff, that they were kind of like they would like tear their ACL or some big injury that takes a long time to get back from. They kind of be like, I don't really know. And then they'd try and play. They wouldn't do the rehab to the fullest extent, and then they would get hurt again. And then at that time, then it goes into their, like, it's a huge mental thing, because everything they've done their whole life for this one sport is now gone. They can't do it anymore. And then you have to deal with the mental side that way as well. So definitely, like you were saying, it's important to make sure that the athlete wants to, like, that you know that they really want to go through the training and go and get back on the field, because if they don't and they try it anyways, it could lead to worse things.
Correct.
Otherwise.
And just remember, we are humans, right? So the Like we're talking today, control is an illusion. You have control over nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You have control over nothing because you can't control anything. Control is just an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
So as an athlete, we want to have control over the situation that's happening in the game.
Right.
But all the factors can be completely different to 10 different directions. You have no control.
You can control your body and what your body's doing, but that's it, really. Like, you don't know what your teammates next to you is going to do. You don't know what your opponent is going to do. You don't know if the ball's going to take a weird bounce on the field. All sorts of things that are outside of your control. Definitely, that's a difficult thing. I feel like people don't understand that sometimes. It's like it leads to frustration in athletes. I feel like sometimes.
Yes, and I think that some of those things that it comes into buying into an athlete. So knowing where the athlete is, where they stand, where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I need to earn their trust.
Right.
I need to earn to make sure they want to work with me, not for me.
Right.
They need to understand they are my team. They need to understand that I'm here to help them and educate them, not to make their life miserable.
Right.
Because many times we have coaches that never had an experience coaching, and they basically bully the kids. Now the kids have a self-defense mechanism to basically reject whatever the coach is saying.
Right. They just want to make the kids run or whatever, all sorts of wacky things.
Correct. And basically understanding where the kid is.
Mm-hmm.
I do basically a psychological evaluation before I even go into a mechanical evaluation. Mm-hmm. And from there, understand where they are, what their past been, what was their childhood like.
Right.
Understanding how they got into the sport. Oh, it was that who put you in the sport. Oh, you really wanted to play soccer. Okay, so tell me more about it.
Yeah.
Now, really understanding where the kid comes from, it helps you to develop the structure for the workout. Mm-hmm. Because now you get to know your athlete.
Right.
You get to know where the kid came from. You get to know where this athlete came from. What was it like during the injury? What was it going through your head when you were sitting in bed right after surgery?
Right.
So really getting to know your athlete is the key. And from that, now the athlete gets to trust you.
Right, definitely.
Now the athlete trusts you. Now the ankle starts trusting itself. Mm-hmm. Because they need to trust something that is going to be there to hold them before they fall.
Definitely.
And not knowing is scary for anybody.
Right.
Because if you go into a woods, into the jungle, and it's dark, you're afraid, but what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of the dark, the unknown, right?
Yeah,
but there is two factors there. There is things that we call the unknown, right? So we know there is something that we don't know.
Right.
But we don't know what is it that we don't know what else is in there. So there's two factors. Right. You only know what you don't know.
Right.
But you don't know what you don't know inside the jungle. And that's an even stronger fear.
Right.
So they know they may get hurt, but they don't know how they're going to get hurt again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But now they goes into like, what, will I get hurt playing? What happens if I land? Now they goes to the fear factor.
Yeah, and then they don't jump. And if they jump softer or not as explosive as they should, and that can lead to more injury. You hear that in basketball all the time. If you're taken to the hoop and you go soft, you're more likely to get hurt because you're going to get clobbered by the big guy instead of taking the contact like you otherwise would before you got hurt. Yeah, that's interesting. How much does your workout plan change based on the psychological?
So I take at least an hour and a half with each athlete based on how serious they are, and also with every client. So you get people that are coming back from an injury. It can be like a spinal cord or a fuse. Mm-hmm. It can be a knee replacement. Right. And so many other factors can go into a client. So as an athlete, right?
Right.
So basically, the first thing I do, I go through a scanning. They get to know their body. Right after that, I go into a passive assessment. But before I go into movement, I go into basically first thing, which is activation. Do you really know how to activate this muscle? Yes, no. Okay, if you don't, I'll teach you.
Okay.
Why? Because if we're going to have an athlete do squats, if they're only activating their quads and they don't know how to use their glutes.
Not good.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they have to understand that. For an activation, we go to a pre-warm-up, right? The activation can be just body weights, understanding, scanning. From there, we're going to active stretches or active release stretches based on what the athlete needs. And then from there, we're going to a mobility stretch and flexibility patterns. Where because they have to be able to understand the elasticity of the muscle, the elongation of the muscle with the tendon, and the mobility with the muscle, tendon, joints, and ligaments.
Right.
So they have to be able to understand what joint really needs to move and what joint doesn't have to move.
Right, and how it all connects and stuff.
Correct. Yeah. Because if I have someone doing bilateral mechanics, they have to understand that the ankle needs to rotate. The knee doesn't have to rotate.
Right.
The hip needs to open. The knee doesn't have to go inwards. So if they don't understand those patterns, then we go into the mass balancing. Well, what part of your body is actually doing most of the work? And then from there, we start developing the program.
And then you execute the program. Obviously.
Correct. Then you start executing the program, and then you go into the first week protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And based on how many times they're training with you, and then you go to the second week protocol. The first 4 week protocol is activation and domination of the patterns.
Right.
So the moment the athlete understands what they're doing and how they're trying to accomplish those patterns, now you see their development.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into a performance patterns, right?
Right.
And now you go into a complete different functional. You go either, before I start loading my weights with my athletes with weights and stuff,
Right.
I really need to know the athlete is moving right.
Right. The patterns of movement are the way they need to be. So when you put more stress, it doesn't crumble under.
Correct. So it's building up the stronger foundation
Right.
will only allow me to put more weight on top of the foundation.
Right. That makes sense.